I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for our live webinar, Mastering Real Estate Development Financials, How Sage Intacct Powers Developers' Success. If you have any questions as we go through today's demonstration, please place them in the chat or the Q&A. We have time set aside at the end to answer any questions, and a recording of today's webinar will be sent out once we conclude the webinar. Again, thanks for joining. My name is Kayla Hall, and I will be your host today. I am the Sage Intacct Practice Director at CBIZ CompuData, with over 5 years of experience managing and implementing Sage Intacct, plus 7 years in accounting and finance, where I was an end user of Intacct as well. I specialize in analyzing internal processes, improve efficiencies, and automating workflows, of course, with the help of Intacct and its AI and automation. I'm very passionate about the construction industry and actively involved in associations like CFMA, Construction Finance Management Association, where I serve on the board, and I'm actually current president of my local chapter. With my deep expertise in Intacct, I help drive strategic goals, empower my team, and build strong, lasting client relationships. Quick agenda for our webinar today. It's going to be a 45-minute session. First, we'll kick things off with a quick introduction and overview. Then I'll take you through the demo, which will show you how to simplify complex multi-entity operations with robust reporting capabilities, including consolidation, actionable financial and property performance insights, track transactions across multiple dimensions, different cost centers, effectively track construction costs and budgets across the project lifecycle, optimize property revenue with efficient lease and tenant management with the Intacct real estate add-on, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Just a little bit about our Sage practice. We are a leading Sage partner with over 30 years of experience migrating and implementing Sage solutions. Our team of certified Sage Intacct consultants are dedicated to supporting construction and real estate development companies with extensive Sage expertise and a deep understanding of the construction industry to deliver tailored workflow solutions that enhance operational efficiency. We are recognized as an award-winning VAR for nearly 20 consecutive years. We boost 98% customer satisfaction and accolades from some of the awards you see below, including Accounting Today's Top 100, Bob Scott's Top 100 VARs, Bob Scott's VAR Stars, and MSP 501. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the presentation. We'll go ahead and share my screen, which it is Intacct. Can you see? You see Intacct? Can someone?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Michelle. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera just to make sure that we have bandwidth. Okay, so I like to start with dashboards. You can configure Intacct to land on a specific dashboard. This one is representing maybe a manager of real estate, someone who's tracking all of the properties and the leases and the tenant information or any AP aging. All of the components that you'll see in a number of different dashboards that I'll go ahead and show are completely customizable. There is out-of-the-box dashboards that come with Intacct as soon as your clients or as soon as you go live. And they're very easy to customize. Like I said, we can modify, we can change out the dimension groups. So you can see here, this is property. If we wanted to change that, we could quickly edit and come in here and say, okay, maybe we don't want everyone to see this dashboard. We can filter the permissions. We can also come in here and determine what dimensions or cost centers we want available in the filter. So maybe location is an important one to us, department or service line. So we can slice and dice the different dimensions that we have available to select to filter these dashboards on. We can also include the rent roll report, operating expenses in a graph form. We can change the output of these graphs and the visuals that are included. We have records, things like checklists where we can say, we can assign deliverables to other users in Intacct. So there's quite a bit that we can do within the different dashboards here. Also wanted to go ahead and show you one of these investment dashboards. So again, you can see that we're including GL buckets in our performance cards here. And then we've got financial reports down below, which again, we can customize and slice and dice data in a lot of different ways. Anything that you see that is hyperlinked in green or in blue here, we can actually drill down into those transactions. We can also create visual indicators and and to determine if something's, above average, less than average, etc. Again, some more financial charts here. Also wanted to make sure and show you guys the CFO dashboard. So again, we can see the performance cards comparing to prior periods or to comparing to a budget. So there's quite a bit of components that we can include on these dashboards. There's also a out-of-the-box project performance dashboard. So I'll go ahead and go to that one. This is for, developers who are also acting as general contractors. We can have a specific dashboard that is separated, or we can create dimension groups by project manager. So we can actually filter it for a specific project manager that so that he can take a look at all of his active projects. We'll go ahead and refresh this project overview. If we want to drill down, it'll actually take us to a quick P&L of the performance card that we're drilling into. If we wanted to continue to drill down, we can come in here. It does take us to this general ledger report. This is kind of our Bible in Intacct. We can come and customize this. We've got a lot of different filters and formatting if we want details or less details. You can see that it is following the filters from the dashboard. But I can come in here and add additional cost centers. So like projects, location information. If I do want the cost code and cost type, I can include those here. So really whatever pertains to the individual who's running this report, they can customize the columns, and then you'll see that those add additional columns with those dimensions. So again, we can export this to Excel, CSV, to toggle through the information here. And this is for me specifically as a user. So it's customized for me only. If I continue to drill down, it's actually going to take me to the specific transaction. So Kingston Plumbing, that comes from a subcontract agreement. If I go and view that, then I can see, okay, here's a subcontract that I can continue to drill down into. This gives me all of the details from the sub, the posting details, the history, any payment information. If I go back to the invoice, let's see, go back and drill down. It's also available there. So the invoice has all those details as well. If I have permission to edit, I can actually edit right here as well. Again, the posting details, how it's posting to the general ledger, the journal entry that this is tied to, the history, so when it was created. There's also an extensive audit trail as well that shows, okay, Chris Kirby entered this through the UI, so manually, and it was modified at this date. This is when it was paid. So there's an extensive audit trail on every single transaction that you can drill into from the dashboard. You can also create audit reports that show all the audit trail in mass as well. If I make a change, I can exit the pop-ups, and then it'll take me back to my dashboard here. If I wanted to refresh my browser, everything's in real time. So again, you can continue to drill down. Again, this is just a couple examples of the financial reports and how we have the ability to create our dimensions in the rows and then our account groups across the columns. We can create calculations over under billings. There's a backlog report here. So quite a bit that we can do within the system. Project profitability. This is showing a financial report that has our account groups as the rows, and then across the columns are project types. So different project types instead of individual projects, where this one shows individual projects that are made up of the project type restaurant. So again, slicing and dicing data in different ways. This would include custom fields. If we want to group by a custom field, we have the ability to do that as well. Going into our financial reports, we can come and look at this. So profit and loss, we've got about 40 out of the box financial reports. So as soon as you go live in Intacct, you'll have access to all of these. There is a project overview report, again, showing those dimensions. If I come over here in this demo environment, we can take a look at, again, this one has custom reports as well. If we come into the profit and loss here in detail, in the columns, you can see that we have the ability to add, okay, here is the actual GL amount or a bucket. We can also pull in budgets or project estimates. Get rid of that. We can also come in here and say, okay, we're expanding by properties today using this cost center. So here's all of our different dimensions. We're going to go ahead and run this as a property. which you can see here. So you can see that we have a column for the education, environment, health, and then no property, all properties. With just a quick click of a button, if I wanted to change this to expand by entities or locations, and again, I've got all the levels because we do have a parent-child hierarchy in Intacct. So if you wanted all levels, one level down with roll up, you have the option to set that here. You can rerun it, and then you'll see how with just a quick click of a button, it expands by the location dimension rather than the project dimension. So here is the different activity that we have. Again, we can drill into that. We can determine if we want this in detail or summary, so we can consolidate a lot of these sections here. Again, these are called account groups in Intacct. And if we went into the rows, and you'll see that we have this account group specifically is net income. If we want to take a look at this revenue account, we have mapped all of these different revenue buckets into this account group. We also can go a step further and filter for the specific cost centers that we have if we wanted to, take out specific data and then put it back in after the fact. So a lot of flexibility in how we can develop these account groups, and then using dimension filters. We can also do computations here. We can do specific GL accounts. So if we don't want to map them to a category and we want to say, okay, all of our cash accounts are going to be the 1000s through, 1070, and we can add that and have that range be this account group. So you're just you're creating the hierarchy, associating it with reports, and then we have the ability in the columns to filter out how those reports are run. So we do have a couple of different examples here just to show that here's a financial report of some investments. So you can see we've got the cost basis, fair value adjustments, the year-to-date percentages, again with conditional formatting, and then the fair market value for the year-to-date. Here's another one where we have elimination entity. So there is a consolidation module for consolidating automatically into an elimination book. So this is showing all of the different entities and their transactions in a consolidated view. Every time we run a financial report, we will get a consolidated column at the end, and then individual based off of the dimension that you're expanding by. Here's something very similar where you have each of the locations, and this is filtered for the due to, due froms, where we have entity 100, 200, 300, and then all locations here at the end. And again, you can print these, you can export these to Excel, you can email these out. So quite a bit that we can do within the financial reports here and create consolidated reporting. If you run these, we have the options to run them in the browser, like you saw here up top. We can also export them to CSV, PDF, Excel, or we can schedule these out. So we can actually email these to individuals who don't have Intacct access. There's no limit to the amount of emails we can associate here. We can say, this is never going to end. It's going to be emailed on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, or just following GL close. We can put a specific group in here. So again, if you have a project manager group or, different project types, we can select that here. And then you can say, okay, I want to create an individual report for each of the projects that are in this group. Same with the locations. So if we have entities, entity 200, which includes a couple locations, we want to create an individual report for each of those individual entities and locations rather than a consolidated report. So we can email this out. We can determine how we're emailing it. Is it in the browser, PDF, CSV, Excel? I can include to CC myself in order to confirm that the users are receiving this report. And then I can put a message in here as well. Please see multi-entity report for month end or for daily. We can also store these in Intacct to access later through the report center. We can also store them in the cloud. So if your team is using a share file or a SharePoint site, we can actually send those directly to those files so that other team members can access those as well. We have a couple different reporting engines as well that I'm not going to cover today. The interactive customer report writer is really specifically for construction job costing reports. So anything that you can do in Excel, pivot table, Excel-like formulas, that's going to be done through the interactive customer report. It's interactive as well, so you can select something within the report and it'll populate data. And then custom reports is really just the basic report writer for end users. Again, because of the different reporting flexibility that we do have a report center that consolidates all of those reports in Intacct. And it keeps it organized. You can filter by module. So once that comes up, So here's a report center. Again, if I wanted to filter and was looking for a specific AP report, for example, I can filter for accounts payable and see all of the reports that are available to me that pertain to AP. Same with properties, project reporting. I can favorite reports as well under all applications. I can memorize reports. I can look at my scheduled reports. I can look at my custom reports and then the reports that I've memorized as well in my reports. That is the dashboards and reporting at a very high level, going into the multi-entity functionality. So you'll notice right now that I'm at the top level. I can filter and toggle between my lower entity level. So if I wanted to drill into entity 100, I can access entity 100 here. I could stay at the top level. If I wanted to automatically create intercompany transactions through the advanced inter-entity mapping plan that you see here, then I would have to stay at the top level. But I am able to drill into the entity, transact in the entity. I could have my own chart of accounts at the entity level, my own list of bills or vendors or customers or projects or properties. So I can have my own cost centers, my own chart of accounts. I can even restrict users, which I'm going to be showing you that in just a bit, to specific entities so that they can't see other entities or they don't have access to top level. But really the purpose of having this top level is to automate transactions that are going to be intercompany. So we've mapped them here. You can see that we have entity A and entity B, and then the inter-entity receivable, and then the inter-entity payable account associated with entity A, and then the inter-entity receivable and inter-entity payable associated with entity B. So we create a relationship within each entity so that it looks at this mapping so that it knows what due to and due from to choose when using these entities or locations. So what that means is if I'm creating a journal entry, which, the standard user interface of Intacct looks like this, we have our header information like you saw in the AP bill, and then we've got our entries down below. If I was to create an intercompany transaction here, I could have a source entity here, and then down below, I might have a separate entity or location. I would go ahead and put through, different accounts here. I'm just going to select some. We also have allocation templates that we can use. So we can actually allocate a specific line to split. So if we wanted to add one real quick, and this comes with standard Intacct, but we can do it by a specific percentage, an exact amount, a fixed amount with over under logic. And you would put in the lines here so that every time you assign this allocation template, it would be like entering these within each entry individually. So instead of having to do that, you could easily assign an allocation template and the system would automatically allocate the costs to those different cost centers. Or you could go through and manually do it here as well. We're going to just go ahead and post this into the inter-entity journal. We'll say inter-entity payable. You can create an automatic reversal as well, and then attachments actually can be dragged and dropped into Intacct. And no matter where you're adding attachments, whether it's on the customer, on the property, on the transaction itself, like the journal entry, they're all actually going to be stored in Intacct through a document repository. So under company, you can see all of our attachments here. We can organize them by folders, but they're all stored within Intacct. I'm going to go ahead and submit this. If I have GL approvals turned on, it would go through the approval workflow. Otherwise, I'll just go into my journal and then I'll go into my inter-entity payable. So here's the inter-entity here. And it would have triggered that due to, due from automatically. So that intercompany relationship that we saw on the prior screen in the inter-entity account mapping, it would look to that source entity and it would trigger based off of what we saw there. Another way that Intacct automates inter-entity is through AP bills. So we'll notice that this entity or this bill here, it also uses an allocation template. So it's actually allocating across multiple locations, even though this one, this amount was 554, but we, divided it by percentage into these different entities. And then we want to pay this. So again, we've got a couple different posted AP bills here with different cost centers and entities. When I go to pay this, I can either pay it individually here, or I can go in, pay bills, I have the option to pay by entity. So it'll actually break out the bill transaction and entries by entity, and I can bill. So I can only bill, for what's posted to entity 100 with a checking account that is associated with 100. So here's our different checking accounts. You'll see that these entity numbers here are the entities that each of these checking accounts are associated with. So in Intacct, every checking account that you set up, and again, you can set these up at the entity level or at the top level if we want them to be shared. Each checking account has to be assigned a location or entity. So here are the different variations. So for example, if I wanted to pay all of it with this bank account here, I'm just going to select all of these, even though they're all 4 different entities. And we're just going to do a check. We'll go ahead and pay now. Then it's also going to trigger that due to, due from. So once we go and print those checks, go ahead and print them. And again, we can generate an ACH file directly from Intacct as well. If this is going to pop up with the check format, we'd go ahead and print those. We'd confirm. Once those are all posted and paid, they go from posted to paid, as you can see here. Some of these are selected to be paid via ACH. If they were selected and we hadn't confirmed the payment, we can come into view payment requests here and cancel those. Otherwise, I will go in to take a look at the journal here. So cash disbursements journal, that's where we just triggered these payments. You can see all these payments here. If I went in, you can see that that inter-entity entry is automatically posted. So you can see how it's allocating appropriately based off of the intercompany relationship in the mapping plan that we have identified. So it's automatically going to be posting there. In addition to the automation through the journal entry and AP bill payment, we also have bill back templates in AR. So we can actually create bill back templates here. So this is an example of one where we've identified the revenue account as well as the cost account, and then as well as cost centers or dimensions. If we go into create a invoice and we select, let's see, one of these entities. So William and Donna, for example. Because this is associated with an entity, you'll see that we have this bill back template then that's associated with this AR invoice. When we go ahead and select what bill back template we want to use, it'll pre-populate all of the dimensions that we need. We can say, okay, this is for $5,000. If I had any collection notes, or if this was, needed to be associated with a bank draw, we could associate fields that associate these with bank draws. We're going to generate a matching bill for this invoice. I'll go ahead and post, and we got to put a location here. So the location is important. Obviously, it needs to know where we're going to be sending that AP bill. So I'll go ahead and put 200. And then once we put that location, that's how it identifies the vendor on the AP side. So it's actually going to create an AP bill here for Falcon Ridge for that same amount. So it automatically posted those. And again, now it's tagging the customer that we use, which was William and Donna. It's automatically associating that location to this AP bill. Then you can go through into the different entities and pay these appropriately. Going back, so like I mentioned earlier, we can associate specific general ledger accounts at the entity level, as well as customers. So again, if I'm at the top level here, and maybe we have vendors that we've generated or created at the top level, but we only want to give them access to certain entities. So we do have a restrictions tab on all of these dimensions, and we can say, okay, is this a restricted vendor? Maybe it's only available to people that have access to top level. Maybe it's going to be someone who has access to 100 and entity 200, and the other entities don't use this vendor. So we don't need to worry about that. Same with departments. So we can restrict departments as well. We can do this on the checking accounts. So we can restrict checking accounts as well. So whoever we want to be limited to have access to this checking account. Same with customers. Chart of accounts. The chart of accounts we can create account labels for within other entities. So it's the same GL account. If it's at the top level, it would be mapped to a different name potentially if they need to repeat the same account number. Otherwise, you can have unique GL accounts within each entity as well. That's only available within that entity. And you would be able to set those up directly in those entities. So we do have the ability to manage users and what users have access to do here. So if we go into the user experience real quick. Let's just go ahead and look at Emma. So first of all, we would manage her permissions through what's called roles. So you can see there's a variety of different roles here. If we just go into the admin role real quick, you'll see that these are managed through each module. If we come into, for example, accounts payable module, you'll see how extensive and thorough each of these roles and permissions can be. So we can say, okay, yes, they have access to add vendors, but maybe we don't have access to look at the bank details for that vendor. So we can get very specific with what each individual has access to. And then once we determine those roles and assign those roles, then we can also limit what entities they have access to. So maybe we don't want them to have access to top level and just have access to 100 and 200. Same with departments. Maybe we only want Emma to have access to these departments so that she can't see the marketing budget or any legal fees, sales, administration. We just want her for the investment side. Same with territories for sales professionals. So we'll go ahead and we will save her permissions. And then I'm actually over here, have her access up, show you. So as soon as she logs in, she has the option to see, and before I save that, she did have access to top level. She has access to 100, 200, but she doesn't have access to any of those other locations. If me as Emma, if I was to create an AP bill, even at the top level, then you'll see that my location dropdown is filtered based off of my permission. Same with departments. So I don't have access to that marketing admin. I only have access to what I need. And if I can drill into here, if someone only had one entity access, then as soon as they logged in, they would be available, or they'd be within that entity and they wouldn't see any other entities. So there's a lot of flexibility in how we can set these up, how we can give users access to what modules, and we can restrict their permissions as well based off of what we want them to see. All right, going into more of a project management standpoint, I'm going into a different demo environment here. We do have the ability, and I'm actually going to go at the entity level. So we have projects, we can create project hierarchy. So parent-child relationships, if you have sub-projects or phases or work packages are also what they're known as. We do have cost codes that we would determine and assign. Usually these are from a catalog because they're consistently used across all projects. So we can either add them directly from here and save. Each one of these is associated with the cost type. So the cost type is usually equipment, other, subcontract, material, labor, but sometimes for developers, it's soft cost and hard cost. So depending how you want to track those type of costs on your projects, again, we have soft costs, hard costs, or we've got the usual construction cost types of, overhead, overtime, or other, labor, material, etc. These are all mapped to GL accounts in Intacct. So once we set up a project, all we have to worry about, and if I go back to the projects real quick, we'd come in here. Let's look at 5 Oak Storage as an example. So once we set up a project, we can determine the location, the department, and the class, if we're using class. And these dimensions will default every time we select this project. Same with the customer. If we associate this with the customer, which is relabeled as tenant here, all of those dimensions will pre-populate. And then the cost codes and cost types is going to be how it's posted to the general ledger and what to know what general ledger it's posted to. You don't have to do it that way, but that's the normal construction or developer route. There is the option to change that through dimensional relationships in Intacct, and so that we can automate a lot of these dimensions because it can be overwhelming for users. But looking at this project setup, we would assign a project manager for maybe approval workflows if needed. We have an additional information tab that shows us the type of billing and if we need to create billable transactions or default that billable flag, resources and billing, if we want to determine rate tables, a quick project summary. So if you're a project manager or a project admin and you want to look at a project, you can look here, look at the financial summary. This is completely customizable. So right now it's based off of the different labor codes. We could track this by soft cost, hard cost, billings, profit margin, expenses incurred, revenue to date. So you can kind of filter that and change that out. You also have your project projections based off of the budget or project estimate. And that's all entered in Intacct as well under our project estimates here. So we can create budget to actual reports. Our hours are going to be automatically pulled in as either billable, non-billable, utilized, non-utilized, automatically through our timesheets in Intacct. And then we also can look at, okay, here's our billable expenses, non-billable expenses, total PO commitments, which is also linked here. All of our commitments are listed out under purchasing commitments, so we can actually drill into them specifically, or we can look at them at high level, see, okay, here's our original amount for total commitments for this project. Here's any posted change orders. Here's the amount that we've invoiced, if we've withheld retainage, if we've paid that amount, and then the remaining balance on that invoice. So again, if we want to drill into that, it would take us to those subcontract documents. And you can see that we have a lot of detail here to track subcontract information if needed. We can inactivate these sections if needed, but you do have quite a bit of information here, as well as any custom fields or custom sections we need to add. Is very easy to do that. And then under change documents, you'd be able to see any change orders that have been posted to this subcontract. And then again, the history, if it's been invoiced, etc. With that, once we enter our project, which can be done through the estimate, so we can actually import the estimate and set up the project cost code cost type all within one import. So this import estimate with WBS would automate that. You'd get your estimate and your job setup. Then you'd come over to your project contracts and you would start setting up your project contract. So this would be like your schedule of values or your time and material lines. If you did have time and material, you'd be able to associate, so if we come into this line, for example, you'd be able to associate the time and material with a specific rate table. The rate tables in Intacct are very extensive, so you can actually create a markup rate or a labor rate for all of the timesheet fields, whether it's an employee position field, a labor class field, union, so anybody that's doing certified payroll, we can account for that. Purchasing rate entries, if it's a markup percent or a unit price percent. AP is a markup. You know, if we have general ledger entries that need to be reimbursable or credit card expenses, we can create markups for those as well. Also, when we do set a billing type as time and material for contract lines, we'll have this cost code tab come over so that you associate what cost codes on the project are going to be associated with this time and material contract line. That way the system automatically applies all of these transactions that are posted to these cost codes to that rate table, and it knows to mark them up as time and material. Otherwise, it would just go as the progress bill amount, and those transactions wouldn't come over when generating an invoice. So that would be how you handle time and material. So if we just go ahead and take a look at this schedule of values, for example, we have our retainage amount that we're withholding. We're marking this as billable to come through. We've got all of our dimensions and cost centers, which we can align. This is going to be what's posted onto the invoice when we generate this contract line. If we wanted to follow the estimate cost codes, we could create multiple entries here that make up one project contract line, so one line on the invoice, but we break it out by the different activity codes that follow our estimate. So that might make sense to some of you. If not, then you can disregard. We'll go ahead and look at the billing details here. So you can actually see the specific billing details on this contract line. So again, you can see the contract invoices that have been generated, as well as payments that have been received. Or I can go back out and look at this project as a whole, this contract as a whole, to see all of the invoices that have been generated, not just from that contract line, but from this contract altogether. So here's all the contract invoices. We haven't released any retainage invoices. Here's our invoices or payments that we've received, which again, we can drill into. We can take a look at what invoices this was applied to, what credits were applied, the posting details, etc. So it's a lot of information right at your fingertips. And then any change orders, if you have change requests or change orders, you'll be able to see those here as well that are associated with this contract. The change orders are done through the change management workflow, and they actually will have the ability to update both the contract as well as the estimate. So the total cost is going to update the estimate, where the total price is going to update the contract. And it's associated, the estimate is associated on the change request here. So you can see, okay, here's the estimate. Again, the cost is going to update the estimate, where the price updates the contract. If I wanted to drill into that estimate, I'd see that here, and I would see all those change orders down below through the change request estimate entries. So you can see some of these are approved, some of them might be revisions that are just processed. we didn't need approval. So you'd be able to see all that here. Now going in to generate my invoice, whether it's T&M or a project contract fixed fee, we'll go ahead and say, okay, this is going to be the 5 Oak Storage project contract. We're going to bill through the end of the month. I can save this or submit this. I can save it as a draft, or I can put it in a submitted posted. I do have filters for T&M billings if I needed that. And I also can control my display here. So if I was an AR and I wanted certain fields, and I could just send them, sort them in specific order. Here is the information. We've got our project contract summary. This is billing application number 8. Let's put 8 here. Here are our schedule values lines. I'm actually going to go ahead and select just a few of these to invoice. These 3 here. If I wanted to put in the percent, oh, it looks like 100%. This has been billed, so we'll go ahead and bill this one. If I wanted to go ahead and put in, 50% billed here, then it will populate the completed this period. If I rather just put an amount here for 10,000, it'll populate my percent complete to date for that. If I have stored material that I wanted to associate as well, I could input that here. Again, the retainage is going to pull from the contract. If I did want to release and bill the retainage at the same time, so that shows up on this AIA document, I can put that in here. Otherwise, I can always override that when I have that selected. If I did have time and material transactions, and I would see those down below here with the markups, you can see there's some general ledger transactions here for burden. We'll go ahead and unselect those. But you would see those transactions, and you'd be able to see the source here as well, and drill down into that. I'm going to go ahead and create this invoice. Once that runs, it'll show me if it was successful. I can also run this offline if it's a large invoice, and then I will go into order entry here, project contract invoice. So here is the invoice we just created. If I wanted to print this, it's going to print my AIA, which is associated with this workflow. I can put in my notary stamp here. Some clients actually post their notary information directly on here. You'll be able to see your change order details, your continuation sheet. You can be able to see that here. We can completely customize these documents based off of your client needs. We can also override by the customer the printed doc template. So if they don't use, they don't use the AIA form, the continuation sheet, they don't need any of that, we can override this printed doc template. We can also use email templates here. So if we wanted to use a specific email template, we can email these from the system. And if you do have backup for time and material and you have source attachments, it'll actually package that backup for you. So you can include all attachments from source documents. Do you want to put them in a zip file, or do you want to just keep them all separate? You have those options. But here's where you would put in a message and say, you'd be able to look up the bill to contact information. So bill to first name, for example, ship to information. We'll just put in bill to first name. You'd copy and paste that. This is called a merge field in Intacct. So this is what we're populating on the printed doc templates, as well as this email template. Please see invoice, and then you'd be able to look up the invoice number, document number. And so you'd be able to just kind of go through here, generate a consistent message. You can include your logo. If it's top, bottom, left, or right, you would determine here. And all of these would be generated outside the system. You'd be able to go into your email delivery logs to see if they were successful, if they've received those, so that it's not living in someone's outbox, it's actually in the system here. We also have real estate invoices. So if you did purchase the real estate add-on, which we'll look at next, we'll go to the top level here, then you would see those coming in through the real estate invoice workflow here. So you can see that we actually associate the lease and the tenant and the property directly on this invoice. So these are all actually generated through the real estate add-on. So what that looks like is, here is the real estate. We'd come in here, we'd say, okay, let's take a look at that real estate module. It will bring us into a new browser here. This is where we would manage all of our properties, our units, our tenants, any recovery templates, or if we do have a management company that we could assign, we would do that all here. So we do have the ability to set up, here's where we set up, okay, our properties, units, tenants, again, the management company, recovery templates, our tasks. So if we wanted to manage our leases or manage charges, filter out the different deposits that we have, enter sales volume or bill percentage of rent. If we do have recoveries, how are we going to be reimbursing those? Are we going to pull actual expenses from the GL? Or are we posting actual expenses from the GL? how are we going to reconcile or escalate? And then there's a series of reports as well available in here. So here you can see these reports. The rent roll specifically is a big one. We do this add-on, this real estate add-on does have a portal that they're working on for their tenants, where they can submit their own, recovery templates, and you can manage any communication with the tenants through that portal. So that is coming. But yeah, that's pretty much the gist of my webinar. I hope I was able to show you the value. I'll go ahead and stop sharing here and then share a PowerPoint. All right, so just to recap why real estate developers are choosing Sage Intacct. We went over project management, real-time reporting, multi-entity consolidation, enhanced cost control, efficient lease and tenant management, and then there's also that compliant and risk mitigation as well as part of it. So any questions? Let me go into the chat here. All right, so one question that we had come in, can the system handle multi-currency and multi-tax rate environments across different entities? So yes, there is multi-currency capability. Sage is all over the world. There is multi-tax rates, tax solutions for VAT and GST, as well as an advanced tax method for sales and use tax within the United States. So there is the capability for, future growth. If you're looking for those capabilities, that is available in Intacct. And then another question, does the ERP allow for cross-entity collaboration and shared resources or projects? The answer is yes. So again, if you recall, I showed you that top level access. If you were to add employees at the top level, then they'd be able to add projects on their timesheets from a variety of different locations and entities. We can also create do-to-do-froms through what's called transaction rules from the timesheet. So if they are a employee that are associated with entity A, for example, but they worked on a project for entity B, we can trigger that additional posting effect, just like that automated inter-entity mapping that you saw. Any other questions? I don't see anything. If you have any follow-up, feel free to email the email address that's here or call our support line. We'd be very happy to give you a customized demo if you're looking for, specific to your needs and your requirements. We can have a discovery session, or if you just have general questions, then feel free to email us. Thank you so much for your time today, and we'll talk to you soon.